ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show. We are live in Las Vegas. Sorry about the little delay there. We had some technical difficulties. So wherever and however you may be watching and listening today, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook is where you can like and follow me on all social media platforms. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel, the home of the Snake Sports Talk Show. That is the Spotlight Sports Network and the Snake Sports Talk Show. And also follow me on Spotify for all of my podcast episodes. Great to have you on here today. It's been quite a interesting week, as it usually has been for the last couple of weeks. But this one for sure has definitely been an interesting week. I can't wait to get into all of it. I'll tell you this. There's been nonstop stories, and there have been nonstop, breaking stuff that have been going on as well. But I'm very excited. And I'm very happy to be here with all of you guys and just to be able to talk about all of these different stories that have been going on. And there's been a lot of them. I've got a packed up show here today, as we're keeping it into an hour today, for personal reasons as well. So let's go ahead and let's dig in and let's dive into it. So let me shift here to this. So the NFL, and we've been talking about this now for the past couple of weeks, maybe even a month and a half ago. But finally, the Dallas Cowboys and quarterback Dak Prescott have finally come to a mutual agreement. So the dealing of it is Dak Prescott, after all of this contract stuff, he's finally signed a $31 million franchise tag, and he got his money's worth. Let me remind you exactly why I think that this deal is a great deal for both sides. Let me just start up on Dak's side, because Dak, we all know, was the only player in Dallas's system who was waiting for a contract. He was waiting for a contract. Dallas had given him one and then rejected it. Then there was also the rumors of the franchise tag, which I'll be the judge of that. Should have been the signing that should have happened about a month ago. Because if you think about it, Dallas is in a position right now in the NFC East where there is no excuses. They got to end up winning the division. They got to end up beating their own in-division teams. That includes Philadelphia, that includes the Giants, and that also includes the Redskins. Well, the other thing Dallas has to do as well is they have to beat teams who are over 500 and are ready to make the playoffs. And I've said this over and over again. In Dak's situation, the only thing that I could say with a high contract like that is Dak Prescott only has one playoff win. And yes, he's only won at least a couple of division titles, but in the end, one playoff win is not going to end up securing the fact that, hey, we need more wins. We need to win more games. We need to get further and further into the playoffs. So ideally, this contract deal is best for both sides. Dak gets his money's worth, $31 million a year, only just for that 1 year. And they only have about 3 weeks for a new contract. This is where it's also good on the other side. Because Dallas, you have a lot of mouths to feed. Okay? You've already lost Travis Frederick to retirement. You've lost Byron Jones to free agency to Miami. Now they got to reshape this thing. They got to reshape this thing for the better. And that is exactly the point that I'm making about Dallas. And everybody's been paid. Zeke, Amari Cooper, DeMarcus Lawrence, Tyrone Smith, Jalen Smith, lots of these guys have been paid. And the only person that I think that they got to end up paying next is going to be Leighton Vander Esch, but there's going to be a couple more that they have to. And if you think about it, the way that I look at Dallas right now this year, I'm not sure how their defensive secondaries is going to stack for them. That's been the biggest question for me in my eyes, because even though Dallas has offense, they drafted CeeDee Lamb. They got plenty of offensive wide receiver weapons for Dak. But in this position, you have to think about in the NFC who Dallas is going to be facing. And you're facing Philadelphia twice a year, who, by the way, they upgraded at wide receiver. There's no excuses for Philadelphia this year either. You got plenty of wide receivers. You're hoping Carson Wentz will stay healthy. And they also got a backup quarterback who I believe is like an insurance policy in Jalen Hurts. He can play. And don't be surprised that Philadelphia uses him and utilizes him in a lot of their play schemes, because that's just how Doug Peterson makes this work. But in this position with Dallas, you've got to there are so many questions about Dallas. And this is why that I've said over and over again that this franchise tag is probably the best decision that Dak Prescott and the Cowboys can make. Because in Dak's position, he's got his money's worth. He now can start working and getting better and hoping that Mike McCarthy, the new head coach, could make this right. Because that's the one question. Can Mike McCarthy turn this organization around? We're not sure yet. Only time will tell. But in this particular situation, there were a lot of questions. But at least in Dallas's position as well, they got this deal done. They can now look at it 3 weeks from now and hoping to have a new game plan. And who knows? It's a lot of uncertainty. We're already living in a world of uncertainty as it is. So now Dallas will have a chance to really look back at their roster, see exactly how they have to reshape and reform, just so that Dallas is not caught in the lines of where they have to make tougher decisions. But finally, they were able to get this done. Dak, now you've got your money's worth. So now let's get ready to play. Let's get ready to play. Because this is the one thing that Dallas, there's a lot of expectations. There's a lot of uncertainties. And who knows exactly how they'll perform by next season. So lots and lots of questions have been coming for them. But hopefully Mike McCarthy will turn this organization around and we'll have a much better record than just an 8-8 with a healthy roster. So this is going to be interesting. But finally, Dak Prescott came to grips, came to terms, and did exactly, and I predicted this at least a month ago. If you just sign the franchise tag, make it easier rather than complexed and a little bit difficult, then it'll be smooth sailing from there. It'll now be easier and a little bit convenient. Let me shift now over here to this, because the best news that we could even ask for is baseball's back. Baseball is officially back. The league and the PA and the Health and Safety Committee have agreed to a 60-game season. Now, 60 games, okay. I'm happy but not thrilled, because I still believe that there would have been enough time to at least get 80 games. Because I would think, look at what happens in hockey. Look at what happens in the NBA. They play 80 games a year. But out of all of those 80 games, there are primetime games. And again, people think that they don't watch them all the time. I beg to differ. There are some fans out there who watch primetime games. Because at least if it gets me glued to a television, then I'll watch it. I'll watch it for 2.5 hours. Absolutely. But that's the happy news now, is that baseball, you finally figured out a decision. You've come to grips with it. And now we're getting baseball back. And all it took was enough lollygagging and enough of this back and forth chatter to finally get this done. Now that we finally decided to straighten our ties up and actually make decisions like adults, we can finally come to the solution. And the solution now is it's 60 games. So from what I'm being told and what's being shown here is that of those 60 games, there are constant tests. And I'm okay with that, because absolutely you got to have all these players healthy. You got to make sure all these players are healthy. The staffs are healthy. Umpires, etc. They all got to be healthy. The other thing of it is, too, is that of those 60, 40 of those games are in-division games. So the Central, the West, and the East, by both American and National League, they all play each other multiple times. All 40 of those games are in division. Then there's only about 20 of them that they'll make interleague, and then there'll even be some fun primetime games in there as well. But you know what's interesting about this is that, and I'll tell you this, I've been saying this off the record. If baseball was making a comeback, and if they were able to figure this thing out sooner than later, because I'll tell you who's going to benefit from this. There are a lot of teams who are going to benefit from this. Now, remember, I did have a while back, I had a top 10 of major league teams to watch throughout the season. Now, I'll have it at least a little bit later, but I could tell you at least a few teams that I think have the better edge now that baseball's coming back. The Dodgers, the Yankees. I think bits and pieces of me says the Houston Astros, but there are more competition. The Braves are ready for it. The A's, the Rays, the White Sox, the Nationals, I believe they want to defend their title. It's going to be interesting, but I could tell you why there are a few teams that have the edge. First of all, the Yankees. The Yankees last year were dealing with injury plagues. Injuries left and right. Lots and lots of players were sidelined and were on the disabled list. And they were they were not so much on their last limbs, but they were close to it. And they had to make this thing work. So now the Yankees get a break. The Dodgers, they get a break because a lot of their young core guys, they're well rested. They're ready to play. And I'll just say this. I think this was all fitted to prepare for a Yankees-Dodgers World Series, regardless of pandemic or not. I think all of this was finally shaping for a Yankees-Dodgers World Series. I even said this too in my previous show doing the rankings, that I think we might actually get it this year. Now, it may be different because we do have extended playoffs as well. We have an extended postseason, and I'm happy for that. But in a sense, with how all these teams are stacking up, everyone's healthy. They're 110% healthy. So the competition side is what I'm happy for, because you got to have competition in sports anywhere. The other thing of it is everybody's now healthy. They're ready to go. They've been waiting for this for a long time. It was only a matter of time until the PA and the commissioner and everybody else in the committee came to grips, came to terms, and actually got a deal done. And I'm happy for it. So, but with it now back, and hopefully I hope that with the baseball season coming back, I've said this before, I hope that this is a positive uplift in a way. I hope that this is a positive uplift. And so at this point, with baseball now coming back, we should at least have positive changes. And I could tell you there are a couple of sports that I know that are going to be going through difficult times, and the NBA is definitely one of them. The NBA is definitely one of them because if you think about it, football, you're in pads, you're in, you got a helmet on, you got protective gear. Baseball, you're only playing about a certain feet away, and that's in every single position. The only time you're close is unless if you're batting and you're right there at home plate. You're there with the umpire and you're there with the catcher, but the catcher's fully geared. Hockey, you've got pads, you've got protective equipment, and you've also got a visor as well. And you're behind glass, you're behind glass walls. So the only thing that's going to be difficult is the NBA because it's such a heavily guarded league that you're close to the player. I mean, it's also conditional as well. There's a lot of conditioning and a lot of running involved. But all these players, I mean, they're sweating, they're breathing in each other's faces. And that, I think, is going to be the biggest difficulty. So, but we'll see how this all pans out. Coming up next, I will be talking at least a little bit more on the NHL, because I think now having hub cities and why that I think that this is this is the best thing moving forward for hockey. Now, we have had a couple of tests, and there have been some tests that have broke out, but the good thing is at least the first wave of it has been shown, and they'll see exactly how they'll deal with this. Plus, also, I share my thoughts on NASCAR and Bubba Wallace as well, and you don't want to end up missing that here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Don't go anywhere. Be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you are just tuning in, I am very, very glad that all of you could come on here today. Like I said, what a fun show that we have here today. Just been lots and lots of stuff going on. I know with the slight delay and stuff like that, we've had some technical difficulties and such. But one thing I wanted to get into, because I will tell you this has now been a breakout story all throughout the past week and even a couple of days before. But I think a lot of people have been asking me and weighing in my mind about this particular story. And remember, I've been a fan of NASCAR since I was 3. I remember when it first inaugurated here in Vegas, when we had the Las Vegas 400. It was the first time that NASCAR made its way into Las Vegas. First time. And it was such a great moment in 1998. But through the course of the years, lots of things have changed. Different drivers have come and gone. And the sport itself had been getting a lot more views, had been getting a lot more fans. And I think people are they've been curious. They've been drawing their interest. But NASCAR has definitely been hitting the headlines, and this is why I want to be able to speak my mind here on this. Because first and foremost, the NASCAR has been making a lot of different changes. They've been making some positive changes all throughout the past week. And a couple of those changes were the banning of the Confederate flag. It's a big deal because if you think about it, lots and lots of fans that are from the South, I mean, they're big on NASCAR. They're absolutely huge on it. And that's what you can expect even on a Sunday afternoon. You know, just a great race. Everybody enjoys themselves, and a lot of people tailgate. It's a big thing. It is a big thing. I mean, if you look at it when you go to, let's say, parts of Alabama, or you even go to Atlanta Raceway, there are lots and lots of different raceways out there that it's big. It's a fun time. But in this particular situation, now they've banned the Confederate flag. They've been making changes with it. But this is where now here comes Bubba Wallace. So what made the headliners was NASCAR ended up finding what was shaped like a noose in the garage of Bubba Wallace's crew and, you know, his garage stall. And the second one of the crew members ended up seeing it, they appointed it right away. And they let it be known. And so once it was known, what I think is such an interesting moment, and I think a moment that none of us should ever forget, is in this moment, regardless of anything that had gone on, and yes, we were dealing with a pandemic also, but it was a time that drivers took a stand. They took a stand for something. Because we know that with the BLM movement, we know with this country, we see exactly the dividends of it. But NASCAR's been making a lot of big time headliners. And so the race in Talladega, everybody stood up for Bubba. And I thought it was probably one of the most surreal moments that you can't even put into context because of everything that had been happening. And Bubba, let me just tell you this. Is he shook up by it? Probably not. But it's okay. You live and you learn. He's not shook up by this whole entire situation. He has been handling it, I think, to me personally, professionally. I think he's been handling this whole entire situation very, very professionally. And I give him props and I give him credit. I stand with Bubba in this whole situation. Now, I know what a lot of people are going to end up saying. They're saying, well, Jake, it wasn't technically a noose. It wasn't technically, all this other stuff. Because you got the rope that's there in the garage stall. Look, I've dealt with garage stalls too. I used to work in a dealership where you had technicians and you had garage stalls. All of those stalls, they were all chains. That was the only way of opening up those stalls. Now, I don't know particularly how NASCAR has it set for their stalls, but from what I've been told, I mean, this is the investigation. The FBI got involved. The FBI did a thorough investigation of the noose and everything else, and they came to the conclusion that this was not a hate crime. But this is where, regardless of it all happening, at least they conducted the searches. But you cannot believe a lot of the people in social media today when they ended up hearing about this, and a lot of people would say, oh, you know, I told you so. It wasn't even based off a hate crime. That's not the case. Whether it was done or not committed by hate or any of that, it was still there. It was still there. Yes, it may have come off as a different message to Bubba Wallace, but he was not wrong. He was not in the wrong. I don't think anybody was in the wrong. Listen, you know, I think about this. I think about in this particular situation and what we're dealing with in life. Because I'll tell you, I have dealt with this in various situations. And let's bring NASCAR into this mix. So let me ask you a question. I mean, we've all taken driver's tests before, right? We've all taken a driver's test in order to get our driver's license. Just for us to have the privilege to drive, right? Do you ever remember a term named or called CSEE? I'll tell you what it breaks down to say. It says search, evaluate, and execute. Because I'll guarantee you what's been happening in today's world, we are searching for a lot of things. We're constantly looking. I mean, look at the new age. We're constantly searching for news stories in social media. We're constantly looking for different stories. And so what's interesting about this is that a lot of people, at least a lot of people, I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of people, when we search for something, we have tendencies where we hop over the evaluation part and we just automatically execute. We see it for what it is and then we just execute without even evaluating the entire situation. Isn't that why most of these stories and most of everything that has been coming out have not been executed briefly or at least professionally? Because there was no evaluation. You didn't evaluate the entire situation. In this particular case, the team, they searched in the stall and they found the noose, took it to NASCAR. NASCAR, of course, said, we're not having it. This is disgusting. And they got the FBI involved, evaluating. They evaluated. When the FBI came to a brief conclusion, they executed that and said that this was not done off of hate. But regardless of that, it still happened. It still happened. So I don't end up wanting to hear all of this. Saying, well, I mean, come on, Jake. It wasn't even done by hate crime. So, you know, I told you about it. Whatever. Whether you even called it or you said you didn't, still, this is a big deal. This is an absolute big deal. Because I'll tell you this, that if it wasn't done off of hate, what other message could have been sent? It could have been a lot worse than that. And are you going to say it's no big deal? We're just going to brush it off? I doubt that. But that's kind of what everyday life has really been like, right? We have way too many people who search for a lot of things, search for stories, whether it's on social media, search for stories that are just all over the place. I mean, think about it. I mean, you hear the term word through the grapevine. You hear it everywhere. But the only unfortunate part is that we all execute very, very fast. Me, especially in this platform, I search for a lot of these stories. I evaluate it to the best of my abilities and to the best of my extent. So when I'm ready for the show, I'm ready to execute. I'm ready to speak my mind. I mean, I spoke my mind about baseball, and I still think all of it was ridiculous, but I'm happy now that baseball is back. I'm not thrilled, but I'm happy for it because they finally took the time to evaluate, which they should have in the first place before even executing a deal. Okay? The NBA, the NFL, and the NHL all have evaluated all of their plans and have come to a proper conclusion. They come to a proper decision, and it's all confirmed. It's all basically confirmed. But baseball had tendencies of dealing with that, and they weren't dealing with it so good. But aside from all of that, nobody was in the wrong. Bubba Wallace was not in the wrong. He did exactly what he thought was right. You know, he stood up, still kept driving, because think about it. Bubba Wallace is the only black driver right now in NASCAR. And a lot of you people are just like, well, he's probably just making hits and all this. Really? You think this whole entire situation is just to get him attention? I doubt that. And in fact, it wasn't even just Bubba Wallace that was standing, but it was also all the drivers. Kurt Busch, Jimmy Johnson, and what they called, quote unquote, the fraternity of NASCAR. These were all the brothers who were driving, who drive in every event. They compete. They see something that goes down, they're willing to stand up with each other. And I think that moment there was probably the most powerful and most moving moment that we've ever seen in sports, period. And I'll tell you this, I give Bubba Wallace props. I mean, that's a lot to take in. Was anybody in the wrong? Absolutely not. But this was a concerning situation. And it was something that NASCAR did the right thing, get somebody involved, get at least an educated evaluation and a conclusion. And there was the conclusion. But that doesn't mean that we can brush this off very, very easily. That just means we have to be fully aware and I think better understanding. At least that's what I think throughout this whole entire pandemic. I mean, I've been living and learning throughout this whole thing. I have not been executing unless I had the proper evaluation and I was ready to speak my mind. That's usually what the show is all about. Seeing certain situations and stories for what they are, evaluating every single one of them so that way then I have an idea of why this happened and why they've come to that decision so that way then it's properly executed. It's properly executed. Folks, it's not that difficult. The second you hop over the evaluation part, your story doesn't come out sound. It doesn't. Look at what happened with Drew Brees. Look at what happened with Major League Baseball. Look at what happened with a lot of, I don't want to get into politics, but look at what happens in our nation. There were lots and lots of things that have been said that have been quote unquote executed, but not a whole lot of evaluation, right? Not a whole lot of critical thinking. And I think that is something that all of us as a whole, we the people, should learn from this. And Bubba Wallace, I stand with you. I stand with you throughout this whole process because I think that is a lot to take in. But I think all of us can do better. And I believe that we can do better. All it is just a matter of time and the steps we take for us to be a better, to be a better population, be a better group of people, because there are good groups of people out there. You just got to find them. Coming up next, I'll be talking at least a little bit more on the NHL. and talking about the hub cities. And I still think that this is a good situation for hockey. And I know with the COVID tests, this is where I'll be able to speak my mind um, amongst this whole thing. And I do apologize though for a lot of people because unfortunately the Facebook live stream, I don't know what ended up happening, but there were a lot of technical difficulties. But you can see me here on YouTube live as I'm currently live here on the Spotlight Sports Network and the Snake Sports Talk Show. But by tomorrow, I'll be able to have the live stream fixed up for Facebook so that none of you are left out. But you don't want to end up missing here on this next segment here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Don't go anywhere. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back here to the Snake Sports Talk Show. If you're just tuning in, so one thing that I ended up wanting to talk about at least a little bit, because we have been talking about these COVID tests in certain leagues and even in the NBA. I mean, they had their COVID tests, and so far their numbers were that there were 16 people who tested positive for the coronavirus out of the 302. So that was the first wave of testing for the NBA. The NHL, of course, they're having their testings thoroughly done, and hoping that we'll be able to come back to hockey at some point soon. And we know that we have a date for the NBA, but hoping that we'll have a date soon for hockey. I'm very excited about it, and I can't wait for it. But the one thing, as I've said before, I think that with the hub cities that they have, it's already narrowed down to 6 cities. And Vegas is still nabbed as one of them. I've said this over and over again. You know, Vegas, they've been doing their part. And by the way, it's now mandated and mandatory now that everybody wears masks in public. So it was mandated by the governor of Nevada that we would all end up wearing masks in every public place. I think it is smart. I'm fine with it. I'm absolutely fine with the idea. Any way to stop a virus and any way to shut it down to where it currently sits. You know, I think that that's the best way possible. And if you think about Vegas, there are an awful lot of hotel rooms as well that are willing to do their services, sanitize each of the rooms, and make it comfortable for a lot of these Western Conference organizations. So it's doable. It's doable, and why I think that Vegas is probably the best place to have hockey played as a bubbled city. Because if you think about it, who doesn't end up wanting to play out here in Vegas, especially in T-Mobile Arena? Now, I know that that's the hard part. There aren't going to be fans in the stands, but either way, it's a new look. It's definitely a different change of scenery for sure, at least for a lot of players. And so it kind of gives them a better idea of, I think personally, of what the Vegas Golden Knights are all about. Because we knew when the first year came around, lots of people were like, well, there's nothing but just the Strip. No, it's not just the Strip. There are also other great places in Vegas. You just got to find them. There are a lot of hiking spots. There are a lot of adventurous outdoor spots that you can look at in Vegas. It's matters of finding them. That's all it is. So the other thing that I also wanted to mention as well is that the NFL, all their facilities right now, I mean, they're kind of in standby mode because of all of these coronavirus tests, and hoping that, you know, everything is safe and sound. We know that a lot of players were doing private workouts at the same time as well. I mean, you even seen when Tom Brady was doing his private workout. And by the way, Tom Brady held the camp. Tom Brady held the camp with a lot of the Buccaneers players. And I think this is very impactful. Now, we'll see exactly how that pans out, but you could see the competitive nature in Tom Brady's eyes. You could see that he wants to win. He's a winner, and he loves this new group. And I think NBA, to be honest, playing in a bubbled city in Orlando, it's interesting. But I'm not exactly sure what other cities there would be. I mean, Vegas, at the same time, I think that would be not too bad. I think it would be capable of being a hub city for the NBA, but I think it would be a lot. But think about it. Could you imagine if all sports just came back to Vegas and they just played just through this whole season and playing through a pandemic? I mean, it would be very, very interesting. I think it would kind of give Vegas a taste of what, you know, I think, to me personally, New York City, Los Angeles, lots of these other cities who have multiple teams and multiple organizations of multiple sports. It would give them an idea of what that looks and feels like. Because if you think about it, Los Angeles has so many sports teams from north and south. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge keeping all of them running. But we'll also see, too, with the NFL, because the biggest story was the Hall of Fame game being canceled. Now, it needed to happen, and I get that. But we'll see. We're in times of uncertainty. And I did say this because with everything that had been going on in the past couple of days and even in the past week, I mean, there's still uncertainties. We have no idea how not really severe, but how concerning this COVID-19 is. We have no idea. We haven't even pinpointed how to really suppress this. Now, we have done the right thing, and that is wearing masks, being courteous, be smart, do your part. We've been very smart about that. But we still haven't pinpointed how to really suppress it and really make this virus go away for good. We haven't even gotten to that point yet. All we're doing right now at this very moment is we're basically just taking steps into really kind of halting it and hoping that there is some sort of solution. But that's all that we can do at this point. And I said this. Yes, it is hot during the summertime. It's been 115 degrees in the Vegas Valley. And yes, a lot of people needed to come out. A lot of people are hitting up some of these park pools and a lot of these recreational pools because it's too hot out. I mean, you can't imagine wearing a mask out in the summer at 115. It's a lot. But at the same time, we all have to do our parts. Because I think, and I don't want to end up jinxing this, but I do believe that we may come back to this in the fall. Only a matter of time. Because if we dealt with this during springtime leading up to summer, eventually we'll come back to this in the fall and we'll have to renegotiate, come up with a new plan, come up with new stuff in order to really shut this virus down. That's what we're going to need to do. And that's what's going to need to happen. The other news story of it too, the NHL, they actually had their lottery draft. I believe it was yesterday. They had their lottery draft. And I could read to you at least the couple of picks that have been taken. There are picks that I do agree with until it got to the very end. So here's what I'm looking at so far, at least with some of these teams. So this is what the draft, let me see. So this is what the draft is shaped to look like. So this is from 2 through 8. You have the Sabres at 8, New Jersey Devils at 7, the Anaheim Ducks at 6, Ottawa at number 5, Detroit Red Wings at 4, Ottawa again after the trade from San Jose, and then you have the LA Kings. And then the one spot is open. The one spot is open. So what this plan is that phase 2 will determine which losing qualifying round team has the chance to be the number 1 pick. And there are a lot of teams. There are a lot of teams, especially in the qualifying rounds, that I think would be interesting to watch, because right now there are big time prospects who are coming into the draft. I mean, Alexis Lafreniere is probably one of the biggest ones, but a lot of people can say, well, I don't think that's fair though. Why does it have to be the losing team in the round? Well, think about it. Think about it this way. What are the Edmonton Oilers trying to do? They're trying to get into the playoffs. They are, in fact, in the playoffs, but they got to do something for Connor McDavid. That's the one thing that the Edmonton Oilers are trying to work this out. And so, with that being said, there are a couple of other teams as well Pittsburgh, I don't believe is on that list. But there are at least a few teams. I remember seeing them. I think it was Minnesota, Nashville. There were so many other teams. Even Chicago, the Chicago Blackhawks. And you would think the Chicago Blackhawks, and I still think that they're going to upset the Edmonton Oilers in that qualifying round. But you would think if they ended up losing and they ended up getting the number 1 pick, I think Chicago would be in the right direction of reshaping their organization and reshaping this roster. But this is going to be interesting. I think this is very much going to be interesting for a lot of the fans. But I've even said this. I even looked at a couple of the teams. Ottawa right now is in a rebuild mode. We know that. Now they got the number 3 and the number 5 pick. And then you got the LA Kings at number 2 and the Detroit Red Wings at number 4. Those teams there that are represented are the ones that you know are rebuilding teams. Because right now, the Kings, they got to find new blood. They got to find a new identity. They've already gotten rid of a lot of guys. They still do have Jonathan Quick and they still do have Drew Doughty. But now, this now needs to be a new revamped LA Kings. It has to be a new revamped LA Kings core. Has to be. There are a couple of good young prospects like Alex Turcotte. I think he'll be an interesting kid for years to come. But then you also got Detroit, who Detroit is just, they got to find a way to turn this organization around. And I do believe Steve Yzerman can. But in this position, you got to find pieces that are going to surround guys like Dylan Larkin. Jimmy Howard had a terrible season, this season. And he's got to find a way to get himself back. Then you also have the Ottawa Senators, who have done such a great job with trades and moves that are, I believe, reshaping for the better. Now, they are getting a new arena, but I think now with all these trades, you have to think about it. The Erik Karlsson trade, big-time trade. Derek Brassard was a big-time trade. You also had Mark Stone as a big-time trade. So there were lots of trades that were happening all around. Ryan Dzingel, Matt Duchene. So the only young players that they're surrounding with is Thomas Chabot and Brady Tkachuk. And there are lots more to come. But I think this is the good thing for Ottawa. Now they've got 2 of the top 5 picks. They got 2 of them at the 3 and the 5. And I think it works out perfectly. Then they can now surround themselves, whether it's offense or defense. I definitely do think they need both. Because I think Craig Anderson right now is hurting for defense. And I think that's exactly what Ottawa is in the position to do. Get themselves some defense, maybe get another productive offensive player in the forward position in order to keep up with guys like Brady Tkachuk and Thomas Chabot. But all those teams there before the number 1, they're all rebuilding teams. And that was, I think, probably the best positions that they could be at. But we'll see what the number 1 really has in store. This is interesting. I've never seen a draft where it was determined by the qualifier who lost in the round. I've never seen that before. So this is going to be interesting. And you can only hope that the cards fall in the favor of those that really need to revamp their organization. Because I'll tell you this, Chicago is going to be at a point where they need to reshape their organization. Edmonton wants to win. Edmonton wants to be in the playoffs because they got the best player in hockey currently in Connor McDavid. And it would be a shame, and I said this too, even in baseball, with the LA Angels of Anaheim. They have the best player in baseball in Mike Trout. And yet, you only have one playoff appearance. One playoff appearance. That's it. That's one thing that I would hate to see in a guy like Connor McDavid. This is their second, I believe this is their second appearance in the playoffs since Connor McDavid arrived. And I would hate to see the fact that Connor McDavid, one of the best hockey players currently, parts of his talent are wasted away. But that is something that Edmonton really needs to get a grip of. They really, really do need to revamp, reshape, and hoping that they shape their future right. So that's going to do it here for me on the show. Like I said, I know I cut it short today. It was about an hour, but I do have some stuff going on. And I do want to end up giving a birthday shout out as well. I want to give a birthday shout out to my mother. She is officially turning 50. She turned 50 yesterday, but we're having a fun get together as a family. Especially in times like this, that's the one thing that it is really taught me is it's always good to spend the good quality time with families and friends and a lot of the people closest to you that really mean something to you. And I just want to say happy birthday to my mother. We've been through lots and lots of times, both good and bad, and we made it through thick and thin. And you've made it to the halfway point in life. And we're very proud of all of the accomplishments that you have made all throughout the years. And for that, we appreciate you. This is your day. And definitely enjoy the best of it. So I can't wait for it. Thank you guys all for tuning in here in today's show. I will be back tomorrow, and hopefully I will have this whole technical thing straightened out and be back up on Facebook Live. This is Jake the Snake Silva signing off here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Have a great Saturday and have a great weekend as well. Take care, and we will see you tomorrow morning at 7 a.m.